There's a moment when everything clicks, the veil drops, the game reveals itself, and suddenly you see what everyone else is blind to. But here's the paradox that will haunt you forever. The very gift that sets you free might be the same one that condemns you to walk alone. What happens when you wake up in a world that's still dreaming? What's the price of seeing beyond the illusion that holds society together? You know that feeling, don't you? When you're in a room full of people, and suddenly you can see the invisible threads connecting everyone's behaviors, the unspoken games being played, the collective agreements that nobody dares to question. It's like having X-ray vision for the soul of society itself. This gift of perception, this ability to see the tensions that others miss, the illusions that others accept without question, the social choreography that masquerades as natural law. It's both liberation and exile. The moment you truly see, you step outside the circle of collective unconsciousness. And once you're outside, can you ever really step back in? Think about it. While others move through their days accepting the fundamental premises of their reality, you begin to see these premises for what they truly are: assumptions, agreements, collective hypnosis. You see, the emperor has no clothes, but you're surrounded by people admiring his magnificent wardrobe. Let's pause here and examine something extraordinary. Everything that gives structure to human society, money, time, national borders, corporate hierarchies, academic degrees, these aren't discoveries. They're inventions. They're collective fictions that we've agreed to treat as reality. Money has no inherent value. It's a shared hallucination backed by collective belief. Time, as we measure it, is a human construct overlaid on the eternal now of existence. Nations are imaginary lines on maps that people will kill and die for. These aren't truths. They're agreements. And the moment you see them as agreements rather than absolute realities, something shifts inside you. But here's where it gets dangerous. When you question these fundamental agreements, you're not just challenging ideas. You're threatening the very foundation of social order. You become the person who asks uncomfortable questions at dinner parties. You become the one who points out that the game everyone's playing so seriously is, well, just a game. And society has a word for people who refuse to take the game seriously: troublemaker, disruptor, crazy. Because if too many people start seeing the agreements as agreements rather than absolute truths, the whole carefully constructed house of cards might tumble down. Picture this. You're watching children play a board game. They're completely absorbed, arguing passionately about rules, getting upset when someone doesn't follow the proper procedures. From your adult perspective, you can see that it's just a game, pieces of cardboard and plastic that have meaning only within the context of their shared agreement to play. Now imagine you're the child who suddenly sees the game for what it is. You try to tell the other children, "Hey, these are just pieces of cardboard. We're getting upset over nothing." How do you think they'd react? They'd probably look at you like you've gone crazy. They might even exclude you from future games. This is precisely what happens when you develop the ability to see beyond the collective agreements that structure adult society. You become the person who points out that the emperor has no clothes. And suddenly you're the problem, not the nakedness, but your inconvenient observation of it. The tragedy is that you're still playing with the same pieces on the same board as everyone else. The only difference is that you can see the arbitrary nature of the rules. But this vision, this clarity, transforms you from a player into what the other players see as a spoilsport. And here's the question that haunts every awakened consciousness. Once you see the game as a game, can you ever play it with the same innocent enthusiasm? Can you return to that state of unconscious participation, or are you forever condemned to be the observer among the participants? Throughout history, there's been a consistent pattern. The very individuals who later become revered as great spiritual teachers, profound philosophers, and revolutionary artists were initially rejected, ridiculed, or even persecuted by their contemporaries. Why? Because they dared to see beyond the accepted framework of their time. Consider the mystics who spoke of unity when society was built on separation. Think of the philosophers who questioned fundamental assumptions when questioning itself was seen as dangerous. Remember the artists who painted reality as they saw it, rather than as society demanded they see it. The pattern is always the same. Truth makes people uncomfortable because it threatens the illusions that maintain social order. It's not that these visionaries were spreading lies or causing harm, quite the opposite. They were offering liberation from mental prisons that people didn't even realize they were trapped in. But here's the paradox. The very freedom they offered was perceived as a threat. Because if you're a prisoner who has never seen outside the prison walls, and someone comes along saying, "You're free to leave," your first response might not be gratitude, it might be fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of responsibility, fear of a reality larger and more complex than the one you've grown comfortable with. So they killed Socrates for corrupting the youth with questions. They crucified Jesus for threatening the established religious and political order. They burned mystics for heresy, exiled philosophers for sedition, and dismissed artists as madmen. The message was clear. See if you must, but keep your vision to yourself. Don't disturb the peace. Don't rock the boat. Don't wake up the sleepers, even if they're sleepwalking toward a cliff. And this brings us to perhaps the most profound aspect of awakened vision: the inevitable solitude that comes with seeing beyond the consensus reality. It's not a chosen loneliness, it's an occupational hazard of consciousness itself. You find yourself in an impossible position: speak your truth and face rejection, or remain silent and carry the weight of unsaid insights. Talk too much about what you see, and people begin to avoid you. Stay quiet, and the truth burns inside you like a secret that demands to be shared. This is why, throughout history, seekers have always sought out other seekers. Poets gravitated toward poets. Mystics found other mystics. Philosophers gathered with fellow questioners. Not because they were elitist or exclusive, but because they needed companions who could understand the language of expanded awareness. Think about it. If you've seen something extraordinary, something that has fundamentally changed your understanding of reality, who can you share it with? Only someone who has had a similar depth of experience. Anyone else will either dismiss your insights as fantasy or become uncomfortable with implications they're not ready to face. But even among fellow travelers, there's often a recognition that the deepest truths can't be communicated directly. They can only be pointed to, hinted at, circled around with metaphors and stories. The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself. And so the solitude persists, even in community. You learn to carry your vision like a precious but heavy burden, sharing glimpses when appropriate, but never expecting full understanding from those who haven't made the journey themselves. But here's where many people with expanded awareness make a crucial mistake. They allow their vision to corrupt them. They become bitter about being misunderstood. They develop a sense of superiority over those who don't get it. They transform their gift into a weapon of judgment rather than a tool of compassion. This is the real danger of seeing beyond not the vision itself, but what you do with it. Do you use your expanded awareness to feel special, chosen, superior? Do you look down on others for being caught up in illusions you've transcended? Do you become the spiritual narcissist, the enlightened ego? The paradox is this: true vision should make you more humble, not more arrogant. When you really see the interconnectedness of all things, when you recognize the fundamental unity beneath the apparent diversity, how can you feel superior to anyone? How can you judge others for being caught in illusions when you recognize that these illusions are part of the same cosmic play that includes your own awakening? The key is to carry your vision lightly. Yes, you see things others don't see. Yes, you understand dynamics that others are unconscious of. But this doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just makes you different. And different doesn't mean superior. Think of it this way. If you can see colors that others are blind to, does that make you more valuable as a human being? Or does it simply mean you have a particular capacity that can be used in service of the whole? Your vision is not a crown to wear. It's a tool to use wisely and compassionately. The moment you start feeling superior because of what you can see, you've fallen into a new illusion, perhaps the most dangerous one of all. Because spiritual pride is just ego wearing enlightenment as a costume. Here's one of the most fascinating aspects of having transcendent vision. You might be completely misunderstood in your lifetime, only to be celebrated after you're gone.
History is littered with individuals who were considered madmen in their time but are now revered as visionaries.
The heretic becomes the saint. The madman becomes the prophet. The fool becomes the genius. Van Gogh sold one painting in his lifetime and died in poverty, convinced he was a failure. Now his works sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. Nikola Tesla was dismissed as eccentric and impractical. Now we recognize him as one of the greatest inventors in human history. What changes between rejection and recognition? Not the truth of what these individuals saw. That remains constant. What changes is society's readiness to receive these truths. Sometimes it takes generations for collective consciousness to catch up to individual insight. This creates an interesting question. If you have genuine vision, does it matter whether you're recognized in your lifetime? Does the truth of what you see depend on external validation? Or is the seeing itself its own reward, regardless of whether others acknowledge it? Perhaps the real measure of authentic vision is not whether it brings you fame or acceptance, but whether it brings you peace. Not peace in the sense of comfort or complacency, but peace in the sense of alignment with truth, regardless of the consequences. And there's something profound about living with this kind of integrity, being true to what you see even when the world disagrees. There's a deep satisfaction that comes from aligning your life with your highest understanding, even if that understanding isolates you from conventional society. So how do you live with expanded awareness without being crushed by the weight of what you see? How do you maintain your vision without becoming bitter, arrogant, or completely disconnected from ordinary human life? First, patience. Understand that each person awakens in their own time, if at all. You cannot force enlightenment on anyone, just as no one could force it on you. It arises spontaneously when conditions are right, like a flower blooming when the season is appropriate. This means releasing the compulsive need to wake everyone up. Yes, you see their suffering. Yes, you see how they're trapped in unnecessary limitations. But trying to force awareness on someone who isn't ready is like trying to perform surgery on someone who doesn't know they're sick. It will only be perceived as an attack. Second, humility. Remember that your vision, however profound, is still partial. You may see beyond certain illusions, but that doesn't mean you see everything. Stay curious, stay open. Be willing to be surprised by wisdom coming from unexpected sources. The moment you think you have it all figured out is the moment you stop growing. True wisdom maintains what Zen calls beginner's mind, the openness and wonder of someone encountering truth for the first time, even when dealing with familiar territory. Third, playfulness. One of the most important qualities of awakened consciousness is the ability to hold everything lightly. Yes, you see the cosmic joke. Yes, you understand the ultimate absurdity of taking seriously things that are fundamentally illusory. But this should make you more playful, not more serious. Life is a dance, not a march. It's a game, not a war. It's a dream, not a prison. When you truly understand this, you can participate fully while holding your participation lightly. You can play the game without being played by it. But we must address one of the most insidious traps that awaits anyone with genuine spiritual insight: the temptation to feel special because of what you see. This is perhaps the subtlest and most dangerous corruption of authentic vision. The ego is incredibly clever. When it can't prevent you from having transcendent experiences, it tries to co-opt them. It whispers, "Look how special you are. Look how much more you understand than everyone else. You're chosen, you're enlightened, you're superior." And if you listen to this voice, your gift becomes your prison. True wisdom doesn't make you feel superior. It makes you feel connected. When you really see the fundamental unity of all existence, when you recognize that the same consciousness that awakens in you is present in everyone, how can you feel above anyone else? How can you judge others for not seeing what you see when you understand that their blindness and your sight are both expressions of the same cosmic play? The authentic sage doesn't stand above humanity looking down. They stand within humanity looking around with compassion. They recognize that everyone is doing their best with their current level of understanding. They see the perfection in the apparent imperfection, the intelligence in the apparent ignorance. Remember, the moment your spiritual insight becomes a source of pride rather than humility, you've lost the plot. You've become a prisoner of a golden cage, trapped by the very thing that was supposed to free you. True enlightenment doesn't create a sense of separation between the enlightened and unenlightened. It reveals that such categories are themselves illusions. There's just one consciousness experiencing itself through countless apparent individuals, some more aware of their true nature than others. Perhaps the most accurate metaphor for awakened awareness is a mirror. A mirror reflects everything without judgment, without preference, without distortion. It shows beauty as beauty and ugliness as ugliness, but it doesn't hold on to either. It simply reflects what is. This is how awakened consciousness functions. It sees everything clearly, but it doesn't get caught up in what it sees. It observes the cosmic drama without becoming entangled in it. It witnesses the play of existence without losing itself in the characters or plot. But here's the interesting thing about mirrors. They make some people uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed how some people avoid looking in mirrors or only look at themselves from certain angles? There's something about seeing clearly that can be disturbing to those who prefer the softness of illusion. Similarly, people with awakened consciousness can make others uncomfortable simply by being themselves. Not because they're trying to disturb anyone, but because their clarity reflects back aspects of reality that others might prefer to ignore. They become unwitting mirrors, showing people things about themselves and their world that they're not ready to see. This is why many people prefer the company of those who share their illusions rather than those who might inadvertently challenge them. It's more comfortable to be around people who see the world exactly as you do than to be around someone whose very presence suggests that your perspective might be limited. Let's examine this pattern more closely by looking at specific examples. Socrates was condemned to death not for promoting vice, but for asking questions that made people uncomfortable about their unexamined beliefs. His crime wasn't spreading falsehoods. It was revealing truths that threatened the established order. Jesus was crucified not for promoting hatred, but for teaching love in a way that transcended tribal boundaries. His message of universal compassion threatened the religious and political hierarchies that depended on division and exclusion for their power. Galileo was persecuted not for promoting ignorance, but for revealing scientific truths that contradicted religious orthodoxy. His telescope showed a universe that didn't match the official cosmology, and this made him dangerous to those whose authority depended on maintaining the official version of reality. The pattern is always the same. Visionaries are rejected not for being wrong, but for being inconveniently right. They're punished not for harming society, but for offering healing that requires admitting the existence of wounds that society would rather ignore. This is why many awakened individuals throughout history have communicated their insights through parables, metaphors, poetry, and humor. They learned that direct truth-telling often falls on deaf ears or provokes hostile reactions. But wrap the same truth in a story or a joke, and sometimes it can slip past the mental defenses that reject explicit teaching. They became masters of indirection, pointing at the moon in ways that wouldn't immediately trigger the psychological defenses that protect people from uncomfortable truths. They learned to plant seeds rather than force-feed fruit. But why would anyone choose to see beyond the veil if it brings such challenges? Why would consciousness choose to wake up from comfortable dreams into sometimes harsh reality? What's the deeper motivation that drives this awakening process? The answer lies in understanding what awakening actually brings beyond the initial disorientation and social challenges. Yes, seeing clearly can be lonely and difficult, but it also brings something extraordinary. The ability to laugh without reason, to love without attachment, to live with profound lightness, even in the midst of apparent chaos. When you see through the illusions that trap most people in cycles of seeking and dissatisfaction, you discover a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. When you recognize the fundamental perfection of what is, even with all its apparent imperfections, you find a peace that surpasses understanding. This isn't the peace of ignorance or denial. It's the peace of profound acceptance. It's not the joy of getting what you want, but the joy of recognizing that what is happening is already perfect, even when it doesn't match your preferences. Awakening isn't an escape from life. It's a deeper entrance into it. It's not about transcending the human experience, but about experiencing it fully without being imprisoned by it. It's about participating completely while remaining free. And perhaps most importantly, awakening brings the recognition that you were never actually separate from anyone or anything else. The loneliness that initially comes with seeing beyond consensus reality eventually transforms into a recognition of profound connection with all existence. One of the strongest impulses that comes with expanded awareness is the desire to share your insights with others. When you see clearly, when you understand dynamics that cause unnecessary suffering, there's a natural compassion that wants to help others see what you see. But here's the paradox. Awakening cannot be taught in the conventional sense. It's not information that can be transferred from one mind to another. It's not a technique that can be learned or a method that can be followed. It's a spontaneous recognition that arises when conditions are right. You cannot force someone to see what you see any more than you can force them to fall in love or force them to find something funny. These are spontaneous arisings that happen when they happen, not because someone wills them to happen. This means that the most effective teaching is often not teaching at all, but simply living authentically according to your understanding. When you embody what you've realized, when your life reflects the peace and joy that come with true seeing, others naturally become curious about what you've found. But even then, you must be careful not to become attached to the idea of awakening others. The moment you start measuring your worth by how many people you can enlighten, you've fallen back into ego-based thinking. You've made awakening into another achievement to pursue, another way to feel special. The most authentic approach is to share when asked, to respond when approached, but not to go seeking students or followers. Let people find you naturally if your way of being resonates with something they're seeking. Don't chase after anyone trying to convince them of anything. Remember, life itself is the ultimate teacher. Everyone is exactly where they need to be for their own learning and growth. Your job is not to rescue anyone from their experience, but simply to be available if they genuinely seek what you've found. To understand why some people awaken and others don't, why some see clearly and others remain caught in illusions, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. What if all of this, the sleeping and the awakening, the illusion and the recognition of illusion, is part of a vast cosmic game? Imagine that the universe is playing an elaborate game of hide-and-seek with itself. It hides its true nature behind countless forms and appearances, then seeks to rediscover itself through the experience of apparently separate beings. Sometimes it remains hidden, sometimes it reveals itself, all as part of the same cosmic play. From this perspective, the person caught in illusion and the person who sees through illusion are both expressions of the same cosmic intelligence exploring itself. The dreamer and the one who realizes they're dreaming are both part of the same dream. This understanding transforms everything. You no longer see awakening as something you achieved or others failed to achieve. You see it as a spontaneous flowering of the universe's own self-recognition. You happen to be the location where the universe woke up to itself in this moment. But you're not special because of it. You're simply participating in the cosmic dance of consciousness. And if this is true, then every experience, awakened or asleep, clear or confused, is equally valid as an expression of cosmic creativity. The universe exploring itself through the experience of limitation is just as valuable as the universe recognizing its unlimited nature. This doesn't mean all perspectives are equally accurate or helpful. Some ways of seeing lead to more suffering, others to less. But it does mean that even the experiences of confusion and suffering serve a purpose in the larger cosmic dance of consciousness exploring itself. But let's return to the very human experience of what it feels like to see beyond the consensus reality. Even with the cosmic perspective, the immediate experience can still feel profoundly lonely. You feel like an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. But here's a deeper truth. You were never actually alone. The consciousness that sees through your eyes is the same consciousness that looks through everyone else's eyes, even when they don't recognize it. The awareness that witnesses your thoughts is the same awareness that witnesses everyone's thoughts. You're like a wave that has recognized it's part of the ocean, while surrounded by waves that still think they're separate from the water. But whether the waves recognize it or not, they're all expressions of the same ocean. Your apparent aloneness is actually the deepest possible connection. You've recognized your unity with everything that exists. This recognition doesn't necessarily make the human loneliness go away immediately. You might still crave the companionship of others who share your level of understanding, but it does provide a profound context for that loneliness. You understand it as a temporary experience happening within an eternal connection. And sometimes, in moments of deep stillness, you might experience the truth of this connection directly. The boundaries between self and other dissolve, and you recognize that the loneliness itself is just another appearance in consciousness, no more solid or permanent than any other experience. The truth has its own music, its own rhythm, its own perfect timing. And sooner or later, that music will be heard by those who are ready to hear it. Your job is not to force anyone to listen, but simply to keep playing your part in the cosmic symphony. There's something you notice about people who have truly seen through the cosmic joke. They laugh a lot. Not the nervous laughter of people trying to avoid uncomfortable truths, but the deep, joyful laughter of those who have recognized the ultimate absurdity of taking seriously what is fundamentally playful. They laugh because they see through the pretense. They see people getting incredibly worked up about things that are ultimately empty of the significance attributed to them. They see the cosmic drama being played with such seriousness by actors who have forgotten their acting. But their laughter is not mean-spirited or superior. It's the laughter of recognition, the laughter of relief, the laughter of love. It's the same kind of laughter you might have when watching children play an elaborate game, completely absorbed in their roles, taking every rule and crisis utterly seriously. They've stopped chasing their own shadow. For years, maybe decades, they ran after happiness, success, love, meaning, always just out of reach. Then one day they turned around and realized that what they were seeking was already here, had always been here, was looking through their very eyes. The cosmic joke is that the seeker is what's being sought. The consciousness looking for enlightenment is enlightenment looking for itself. The wave searching for the ocean is already made of ocean water. Once you really get this joke, not intellectually, but in your bones, how can you not laugh? How can you not find the whole cosmic drama hilariously perfect? Not because it's trivial, but because it's so sacred that the only appropriate response is joy. But we need to address a more subtle and perhaps more dangerous trap than being rejected by the world. Rejecting the world yourself. This is where many people with expanded awareness make their most serious mistake. When you see clearly how much unnecessary suffering exists, how much of human behavior is driven by illusion, how much potential is wasted on meaningless pursuits, it's easy to become cynical. It's tempting to withdraw from human society altogether, to become a hermit, to write off the whole human experiment as hopeless. Alternatively, you might become a preacher, someone who feels compelled to point out everyone else's illusions, to correct their thinking, to save them from themselves. This is just another form of rejecting the world as it is, trying to force it to match your vision of how it should be. Both responses, withdrawal and preaching, miss the point of awakened consciousness. True wisdom doesn't separate itself from the world or try to fix the world. It participates fully in the world while understanding the world's ultimately illusory nature. It's like being an actor who fully commits to their role while never forgetting they're in a play. They don't phone in their performance because it's just a play, nor do they try to break character to explain to the other actors that they're in a play. They act with complete authenticity within the context of the agreed-upon fiction. This is the art of awakened living, full participation without identification. Complete engagement without attachment, total commitment to the human experience without losing sight of its dreamlike nature. The moment you reject the world, you've created a new form of separation, a new duality between the spiritual and the mundane, the sacred and the profane. True awakening recognizes that everything is equally sacred, equally perfect, equally worthy of love, even the apparent imperfection, even the illusion itself. So what's the real value of seeing beyond consensus reality? What's the point of awakening if it brings such challenges and doesn't necessarily make life easier or more comfortable? The value lies not in what awakening gives you, but in what it reveals you already are. It doesn't make you perfect, it makes you whole. It doesn't eliminate your humanity, it completes it. It doesn't transcend your limitations, it embraces them as part of a perfect pattern. When you see clearly, you realize that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. You stop trying to get somewhere else and start appreciating where you already are. You stop waiting for life to begin and start recognizing that it's been happening all along. The awakened perspective doesn't diminish life by revealing it as a dream. It makes life infinitely richer. When you recognize the dreamlike nature of existence, every experience becomes fascinating rather than problematic. Every challenge becomes an interesting plot development rather than a disaster to avoid. You begin to see the incredible artistry in the way consciousness creates experience. The way it disguises itself so convincingly as separate individuals, each with their own unique perspective and story. The way it orchestrates this vast cosmic drama with such attention to detail that the actors forget they're acting. And perhaps most importantly, you stop taking yourself so seriously while taking life more seriously than ever. You realize that your personal drama is not ultimately important, which frees you to engage with it more playfully. And you recognize that existence itself is unutterably precious, which inspires you to treat everything with greater reverence. If you've been blessed or cursed with the ability to see beyond consensus reality, what's your responsibility? How should you carry this gift without letting it corrupt you or isolate you completely? Perhaps the most elegant metaphor is to become a bridge rather than a wall. A bridge connects two different areas, making passage possible between them. It doesn't judge either side as superior or inferior. It simply provides a way for movement between different territories. This means being able to speak both languages, the language of consensus reality and the language of expanded awareness. Being able to function effectively in the conventional world while maintaining your deeper understanding. Being able to relate to people where they are without betraying where you are. It's not about dumbing yourself down or pretending to be less aware than you are. It's about finding ways to be genuinely helpful without being condescending. It's about meeting people in their experience without losing touch with your own. Think of how water behaves. It takes the shape of whatever container it's in, but it never stops being water. It adapts to circumstances without losing its essential nature. This is how awakened consciousness can function in the world, flexible enough to meet any situation, but never compromising its fundamental clarity. Sometimes you might plant seeds through casual conversation. Sometimes you might offer perspective through gentle questions. Sometimes you might simply be present with someone in their struggle, offering the gift of clear, non-judgmental awareness. But always, always remember that you're not trying to fix anyone or save anyone. You're simply making yourself available as a bridge between different ways of seeing, trusting that people will cross when they're ready, if they're ready. And so we come to the heart of the matter. Seeing beyond consensus reality is both a gift and a burden, a blessing and a challenge. It offers profound freedom while imposing unique responsibilities. It connects you to ultimate truth while potentially isolating you from immediate community. But perhaps the most important understanding is this. Whether you see clearly or remain caught in illusion, whether you're accepted by society or rejected by it, whether you're understood or misunderstood, none of this changes your fundamental nature. None of it affects your essential worth. None of it alters your deep connection to the source of all existence. You are not your insights. You are not your clarity. You are not your confusion. You are the awareness in which all of these experiences appear. And that awareness is eternally free, eternally whole, eternally perfect, regardless of what forms it takes or what experiences it has. So yes, it's better to stumble forward while awake than to sleepwalk through life with perfect coordination. It's better to see imperfectly than to be perfectly blind. It's better to be a conscious participant in the cosmic drama than an unconscious victim of it. But ultimately, even this preference is just another position, another stance, another way of organizing experience. The deepest truth is that awakened and asleep, clear and confused, accepted and rejected, all of these are equally valid expressions of the one consciousness exploring its own infinite potential. The universe is awakening to itself through you, as you, in this very moment. Not because you're special, but because specialness itself is just another costume that consciousness wears in its cosmic game of hide and seek with itself. And in that recognition, all seeking ends. All questions are answered. All burdens become gifts. All isolation reveals itself as the deepest possible intimacy with everything that exists. The gift of seeing beyond is ultimately the gift of recognizing what was always already here. The danger is forgetting that everyone else has this same gift, whether they recognize it or not. The art is learning to live this recognition with grace, humility, and unconditional love for the magnificent cosmic game in which we're all eternal players. So if you've recognized yourself in these words, if you've felt the simultaneous gift and burden of expanded awareness, know that you're not alone. Know that your vision, however challenging it might be to carry, is needed in this world. Know that your unique perspective, however misunderstood it might be, contributes something essential to the collective awakening of consciousness. But more importantly, know that you don't have to carry this vision perfectly. You don't have to be a perfect teacher, a perfect example, or a perfect bridge between worlds. You just have to be authentic to what you see, compassionate to those who don't see it, and patient with the mysterious timing of consciousness awakening to itself. The world needs your clarity, but it doesn't need your perfection. It needs your truth, but it doesn't need your certainty. It needs your love, but it doesn't need your agreement with everything that happens. What it needs most is your willingness to keep participating in the grand adventure of existence, to keep playing your part in the cosmic drama, to keep being a conscious participant in the universe's eternal exploration of its own infinite nature. And in that participation, in that ongoing willingness to be fully present to whatever arises, you fulfill the deepest purpose of awakened consciousness, not to escape from the human experience, but to bring the light of awareness into every corner of it. This is your invitation, not to transcendence, but to intimate participation. Not to perfection, but to authentic presence. Not to special status, but to ordinary awakeness in the midst of an extraordinary existence. The universe is awakening. You are that awakening. Welcome to the game. If this exploration resonated with something deep within you, if it reflected back truths you've sensed but perhaps couldn't articulate, I invite you to join our community of conscious explorers. Subscribe to continue this journey of awakened awareness together. Like this video if it spoke to the part of you that sees beyond the veil. And remember, you are not alone in your seeing. We are all part of the same cosmic awakening, playing our unique roles in the magnificent dance of consciousness discovering itself. The conversation continues. The awakening deepens. The game goes on.